right, guys. So today we have Steve Hall and Pascal Flor from Revive Stronger. What is up, guys?
All good,
Thanks for
thank you.
having us.
Excited to
The
be
the
on
hall and the
together.
floor.
Yeah, I've never had you guys on together, Steve. Obviously,
Oh,
a frequent guest. Pascal, I think it's been a little over a year since we've talked on
yeah.
the
It's been a while,
podcast.
yeah.
So good to have you guys back on. I saw you liked my message at like 4 in the morning, Pascal. Is that when you get up? Or I think it was 4
Yeah.
in the morning, like Germany time at least. Yeah.
Yeah, here recently, I don't know. It's weird because ever since I cut it down, I get up like very early in the morning, and then there was also the time change as well, so the clocks changed.
Right.
And having two kids at home, it's just like I got used to getting up that early in the
Yeah.
morning, and now sometimes I go out on a walk and then record a voice message for Steve when it's like 2 or 3 a.m. for him.
Right, right. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned because I reached out to you guys about the improvement season. I think it was 151 that you guys had done. And one of the things that you had mentioned, Pascal, was how you always felt that you were busy. And then once you had kids, you're like, wow, like, now it's just a completely different mindset, right? And I think a lot of us who have gone through certain periods that are really busy have experienced that. Like I look at certain periods for me where it's like, okay, in dental school, had a part-time job, was actually still social, was working out still like 4 times a week, doing other things. And I at times I'm like, how was I even doing that? Like it just sounds
Yeah.
ridiculous to me. Especially now, like in the quarantine. Honestly, I mean, I'm still doing stuff. I'm still like, I mean, I have scrubs on now. I'm going into the office after our podcast, but it's nowhere near as much. And yet it still feels like the day is filled up. I'm still like, well, I'm working out and then I see a patient or two and then I do podcast stuff. And then it's before I know it, it's like 10 p.m. So like what happened? And it's like when you're forced to do it, it's just interesting how much you can get done if you really need to.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a time in my life where um I was working on my self-employment, so transitioning over to online coaching. That was the time before. No, it was still at the beginning of Revive Stronger, when I was also building my side project, which is not there anymore because I was fully committed to Revive Stronger. Then after a while, still taking care of my own training. Then also still having an office job of 30 hours per week, which I reduced to 30 hours instead of 40 hours. And then also visiting evening school as well. There was only like half an hour between like going from office work to then the evening school that I had available for myself. And I left the house at 5 in the morning and came back at 9 p.m. And that was my daily schedule for like 5 days out of the week for 2 years straight. And now
Jeez.
looking back at it, I'm just like, how in the hell did I manage that? And on the weekends, I fully committed to actually build the self-employment, which was crazy. And now I'm looking back and be like, I could never do that again. While
Yeah,
at the same time, now I have other commitments I need to take care of. Whereas I would assume that in 10, 20 years, when the kids are leaving the house, we look back and be like, how in the hell did we manage to do all of the
I'm
things
sure.
that we were doing then? It's we always look back in hindsight and be like wondering about our achievements and the things that we've done. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely interesting. So another reason I wanted to get you guys on is just because I wanted to talk about our favorite routine, starting strength. All right. Just just kidding. Um, I did find your take on it interesting, Pascal. Not to even get into the program itself, but more your somewhat of your philosophical musings on people's views and why does anybody care about that? And I think it's interesting when you are in this space. And I saw one of the commenters said how I think one of the reasons is that you are this persona now, and people are going to take what you say somewhat as an authority, right, over just like a random person. And obviously, you see that even more with like celebrity fitness and like Dr.
Yeah.
Oz and crazy stuff like that. And it really is interesting because we are all, we try to be reason and logic based, but at the end of the day, most humans are very emotional decision makers. And sometimes I mean, it can be a subconscious thing. You're not really noticing it, but the example I've often given is if you look at like 3DMJ, right? They don't allow you to pick who you work with, right? I think you guys are the same way. And most people are going to feel a connection more so to a certain person. So for me, if I was to be coached by
Yeah.
3DMJ, I would want Eric Helms because he is who I identify the most with. I feel like we have a more similar body type. He's very, the science guy and all that stuff. But really, is he actually a better coach than maybe, like Brad Loomis when they all work together anyway? And that's just like a small example, but another one is like Greg Doucette. He's not really in the evidence-based community, I guess, but he's somebody who's kind of blown up. And is he a better coach than he was a year ago? Probably not, right? I mean, he's been doing this for 20 years, but his demand for coaching has gone up. It's skyrocketed, where he's able to charge so much and still have more and more people wanting it because you identify with it. And so it's interesting, this kind of appeal to authority we have, and not even necessarily an appeal to authority where it's almost like could be a false authority, right? In the case of you, Pascal, like you're obviously educated, but sometimes it is a false authority where somebody is just famous and we take what they say as gospel, or we at least weight it more than like a random person.
No, absolutely. And so when we are on the Improvement Season podcast, then go ahead, Steve. When we are on the Improvement Season podcast, for me, it's always like we are speaking our minds out loudly, so to speak.
Yeah.
We are two friends that are coming together that are recording this, and we are just like speaking freely, which sometimes I don't think that many people in the industry are doing so. And sometimes, of course, the things that we are saying aren't, as always, very well thought out.
Sure.
Because we are not doing any kind of research before that. We are not planning things out. We don't have a script. And sometimes it's just like, I say something, and then when I really think about it, I would maybe put it in a different way or rephrase that. And we all know that. Right? We all had that conversation and maybe even fight with someone out on the street. And it was like, I wish I would have said that.
Yeah.
We all know that feeling, right? And sometimes it's like you said, we are not rational or logical beings. Sometimes emotions come into play, and the things that we are saying is dictated by that as well. It would be lovely if we all were logical beings, but that's not the case. So when someone then said like, okay, you are now a prominent figure to some extent, and you need to take care of the things that you're saying out loudly, publicly, I actually very much took it to heart because he had definitely a point, and this is something that I need to come to terms with myself as well. But then at the same time, I'm just thinking about the sentence that he brought up, like, okay, you need to actually watch out on what it is that you're saying. I am looking at this statement like from two perspectives. On one hand, I can totally see where he's coming from, especially because of the things that you brought up, that people are looking to those authoritative figures, and the argument from authority is actually putting up to stake here, and people put so much emphasis on the things that people are saying, even though that they have no business in talking about it. And we see it all the time with prominent figures out there. Why should an actor, for example, talk about diets?
Right.
Are they qualified in talking about that? Right. Yeah. For example, or someone like who is, I don't know, Cristiano Ronaldo. Would he go out there and give you business advice or advice on economics? Right. Yeah. That would be outside of his scope of practice, but people are still taking that for granted and listening to that individual. So I can totally see where this point is coming from. While at the same time, I think it's also refreshing to sometimes see that people aren't these perfect beings.
Sure.
And that's why we are also putting a lot of emphasis in those recordings about being transparent, just talking about the things that we are thinking. While once again, there's this conflict of like, okay, do I want to be that figure who presents himself as that perfect individual who only gives out well-thought advice? Or do I want to be a little bit more transparent and be like, okay, I don't know everything, and that is absolutely fine. Sometimes I mess up. Sometimes I'm also saying inappropriate things as well. But then it's also very much important to take on board the criticism that is then being put towards you.
Yeah, I think you guys kind of talked about that as well, as like, staying in one's lane and not going outside of your scope of practice. And it is interesting. I mean, I guess it's just human nature. You're familiar with the term the Dunning-Kruger effect?
Yeah.
So for people who don't know, basically that's the idea that in short, it's that you start to get some knowledge and you assume that you're an expert on the topic, right? You can get more into that. But basically, and you see that obviously with fitness advice, like diet advice, really almost anything, you get this level of knowledge where you could also even refer to like when people talk about conscious incompetence, and then eventually when you go all to the point of being unconscious competence where you're just, let's say you're playing piano, you know that you suck, then you know that you're good, and then eventually you're able to play without really even thinking about it, right? And when you're in that kind of like middle territory where you've been doing this for 2 years, I remember when I was in like eighth grade, I think, and I had been reading into like supplements and diet and everything for maybe like a year or two.
Yeah.
And I had a friend asking me about it. And like I actually like stopped and said, "Oh, I know a lot about this, right?" Like I made a point at like 13, 14 to be like, "So I'm informed, right?" And it just sounded so ridiculous. Or when I was a sophomore in high school and wanting to take a routine to the football coach, and thank God I didn't because I just would have looked like an idiot. But I wanted to like show him like, "Oh, this is the routine that the football team should be doing," right? And like it just you get this point where you just assume that you know more than you do. What's up, Steve? Look at those calves. um,
Boy. No, yeah, absolutely.
what's up, Steve?
Sorry about that. I
No
knew
problem.
this package would come at completely the wrong when they give you like a 4-hour window.
Yeah,
it
right,
just
right.
comes.
Sorry. We're discussing the Dunning-Kruger effect, where basically, people have some level of knowledge and they assume that they are an expert. And we see this all the time with celebrities or really just about anybody where they're maybe in something for a year or two, and now they assume that they are fit to be a coach or do anything. And we've all seen that, of course, with coaching. I had a friend who she had been, she was reasonably gifted, and she, after about 6 months of serious lifting, she had put in her profile she was now a powerlifting coach, and I was just like, I just like, even as a friend, I just like had to hate on her because it was just crazy to see that kind of thing.
Dave, that's so funny that you actually bring that up, because Steve and I were just talking about that today,
Yeah.
over on WhatsApp, because a friend of ours, Mike from Biceps and Banter, he on his Instagram story, I think it was, he was talking about exactly that. So, and he brought up a couple of examples of different professions. So only because you were, I don't know, making a bread at home, you don't go out and opening up a store or becoming a baker now, or selling
Right.
yourself as a baker. Same goes for, I don't know, fixing something at home, fixing your kitchen sink, for example. You don't go out and from now on, only because you've done it once, you offer your plummeting skills or anything alike, right? But apparently that's the case in the fitness industry. Only because you've accomplished something like getting lean once,
Right.
doesn't mean that you understand what coaching is, the fundamental principles behind it, physiology, anatomy, all that kind of stuff. But so many people actually do that. They've done it once, and now they think that they are credible enough to go out there and offer these kind of services.
Right.
And this kind of is so ironic that it only happens in the fitness industry, or at least that's where I'm aware of that. Maybe there's a different industry out there where it's happening as well, but in so many other occupations, you as a customer, you would never go to that plummeter and actually, who only has fixed his own stuff at home, right? You would go to the company that is very well experienced, has the knowledge, has the education to then fix your stuff. So the responsibility is also at the customer to actually then gather that information to see whether that person is actually skilled to be a coach or not.
I think it probably does happen in other fields. I think like financial advice to some degree, anything on YouTube, basically, just you have people who doling out advice at the very least, maybe not doing, they're not going to work as an accountant for you just because they've done well with money, but they might charge for their services as far as advice. But now even I've brought this up in the podcast, when I was first starting, saying how it's very unregulated, so like I'm going into the office later and I'm going to work on a patient, and it's literally illegal for you to do that if you haven't gone through all the steps to do it and gotten a license in the state, right? So I don't really have to worry about, you can look up all you want about like oral anatomy and all that. You're really not like a risk to me, or really anybody. But with this, you don't have to have any credentials. You don't even have to have dieted down. You could just say you did. You could just post up, fake pictures or something and do that. And it is kind of amazing. And I almost get it, because I think, Steve, you were maybe gone for this part, but I was saying how when I was young, like 13, 14 years old, I was actually reasonably informed. I mean, I had like as far as fitness stuff, I had read books already. I had talked to experienced people. Even I made a joke with Pascal saying that I was almost thinking of going to my high school football coach and saying you should do this routine, which of course would have been ridiculous. But I will say that the routine that I was going to recommend was Bill Starr's routine, which was actually very popular among football players, and it probably would have actually been a good idea. But the idea of doing that as a 14-year-old who weighed like 130 pounds was obviously silly. But even though I was informed, I still had this idea that I knew a lot more than I really did. And there's almost a danger that comes with that when, we say, well, of course we can't have somebody acting as a doctor if they haven't gone to medical school or gotten a license. But the reality is that in fitness, you can do a lot of harm to somebody if you're telling them how to
Absolutely.
diet and they don't understand about having like a good relationship with food. They don't understand sustainability. They don't understand the psychology of any of this stuff. You can really damage people. Eating disorders are a terrible thing, and they're rampant in the fitness world. So I think as much as you could just say, well, you're just exercising, it's good, and as long as they're exercising, what's the point? They're healthier than they were before. That's great, just like you could pretend to be a doctor and tell them to, have a better diet or watch their cholesterol, but it doesn't mean that it's comprehensive and that you're not going to do damage in the process.
It's a really tricky area, I think, because it's, like you said, it's completely unregulated. And for me, it's quite new, and it's ever growing. It's just suddenly expanded massively because of Instagram. First, I think there was only maybe some guys on YouTube that were promoting kind of online coaching. At least when I was first getting onto online coaching, it was all through it was like YouTubers. It was like 3DNJ, and then there was some other people within the scene. There wasn't really anyone else doing it. And it's only, I think, literally, Instagram has just made it available to so many people. And I think it's a matter of time until it's going to become regulated, but I don't even know how you do that within kind of this space. So it's such a tricky thing.
The thing is with the regulations, Steve, it would be on a per country basis then. And that would be the problem with an online business that is offering these kind of services online, right? And that this is something that you can see where this conflict comes into play already with the taxes. Something like VAT tax. It always depends on what type of service it is that you are offering, or whether the customer is actually purchasing a product of yours, whether that is then actually being purchased in which country. So the regulations, I think, will definitely take a while before there even are some regulations, if there will be some regulations at all, because I think that each and every single country will be responsible to make those regulations, or like in the EU, also in Europe, it would be the EU which need to come up and make some regulations. And I think it would be so super complicated to actually come up with those, right? And that is not saying that one country where there are regulations, that also then applies to other countries as well. Some countries may not have any kind of regulations, and how is that then going to take place, right? So I think it's a very complex field, simply because it's also such a new field in general. Even though that the internet has been around for quite a long time now, it's still kind of in its infant shoes in many, many fields, because so many new jobs have been founded due to that. Right? Just take something like an influencer. So many people make jokes and fun about that, whether it is a job or not, but people are making very good money off that, right? And it is fairly new. Like 5 years ago, the way an influencer is now being the term influencer, I don't think was even around like 5 years ago. I think it was like YouTube or a vlogger or so, but influencers such as what we're seeing now with Instagram hasn't been around. So I think also because it's so quickly changing and evolving all the time, regulations will become very, very hard to come by.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, even if you look at medicine, people assume if my doctor's saying it, it's legitimate and there's no problems with it. But man, even that is hard within a given country in person. It's hard to regulate. I unfortunately had a patient recently who is checking her prescription history, and she was prescribed just massive amounts of opioids along with Xanax, every month for 10 years. And it's a really unfortunate story. And she's not the only one. But I mean, literally, I could look, I mean, we actually filed to the DEA about this doctor because it was just looking at this like this is malpractice. It was pretty messed up. But that's just one example. Again, this is somebody who's seen a doctor in the United States in person, right? So to try to regulate how, John from the United States is going to work with a coach online in England. I mean, who's going to regulate that? We're not going to have like a global police on that issue. It's just not going to happen. So I don't know if that would ever be strictly regulated.
Yeah, I think it's with personal training, like that's obviously somewhat kind of regulated only in that, like the UK, you have to have a level 3 within this level 3, like level 2, 3, 4. I think like all there is. Level 2 lets you like on the gym floor. Level 3 you can actually coach people. But I know different countries have different ways and different levels, and whether or not they even need the levels. But I have seen organizations and companies coming out with at least like online training qualifications. That's the next step I would imagine, because the industry, we could probably name like 5 people if we wanted to who are trying to do online coaching but aren't really necessarily getting anywhere because it's just saturated. There's so many like just people, because I mean, like we said, like everyone who's competed is now an online coach, it seems, or at least there's a lot of people that are going down that route. So how do they then get an edgeway in maybe this qualification, because then it gives them some credibility? So that I think is probably going to be the next step, but then it needs to come from a really big organization that is very, very credible for that to be even seen. I don't know. It's a very interesting space, and like Pascal said, it's just ever evolving.
It's interesting to me to see who is successful and who is not, because you mentioned like, oh, you compete once and then you're a coach, and you're right, a lot of people do kind of follow that. But I've pretty open about that. I've not competed in a bodybuilding competition. And Pascal, I don't think you have yet, have you?
No.
So, and you are a bodybuilding coach. And so does that mean that you're doing anything wrong? I wouldn't say so, because like you're obviously informed. Now, I will say, and I'll admit this for myself too, there's something to be said for going through that process to truly understand what a client is going through, right? And so, frankly, when people tell me that they want to get really lean, I'm comfortable with that. When somebody says, hey, can you prep me to bodybuilding stage? I've not done that. And I do think that there are people more qualified. Now, if somebody was really pushing it, they said, look, I want to do it with you because XYZ reason, I'm very comfortable with you. After 15 years in this field, I do feel pretty knowledgeable on the topic. But again, I mean, it's, Steve, has it just been one now, or how many have you done?
2 competitive seasons.
Okay. But I've seen people who are very successful coaches, and by successful, I just mean they have a lot of clients. I don't know necessarily, I'm not following their entire body of work, and they haven't done a lot of their own competitions or anything like that. And some of them are good, some of them are not. And then I've seen other people who, I don't want to call him out, but I was just looking at his Instagram yesterday, really good physique, has competed naturally and enhanced. And he doesn't really have much of a following. YouTube videos got like 50 views. And this is a guy who looks amazing, which of course that doesn't necessarily mean that he's knowledgeable. But I'm just saying, even though he's done the competition and he is an actual personal trainer, he doesn't have so far much success with coaching. So it's just kind of interesting to see, like, is it, luck of timing and being in the right place, knowing the right people? It's just kind of interesting to see how it plays out.
Yeah, I mean, in the end, I think that many contributing factors come into play here. First and foremost, what is coaching all about, right? It's, of course, helping people, emphasize having some kind of empathy as well. Not just some kind, but a big portion of it is empathy, understanding what the client wants and also needs in a specific situation, and then also understanding somewhat the fundamental principles of actually getting to the outcome. So having a good genetic base for yourself is, of course, not a necessity of actually being a good coach. It does help, though, because I think that going through the process and also having the passion for the sport yourself does tremendously help. But we also see it from other fields, especially like sports. Not every great coach was an athlete themselves, especially like, for example, football, right? Some coaches just go through that education of becoming a good coach, and then the experience leads the way. This is something that you also see in especially the medical field. I was just thinking about, like, if you want to help drug addicts, it doesn't require you to have been a drug addict before that as well to be
Right.
able to help them, to be able to empathize with them, to understand where they're coming from or what they have come through. The education and experience makes you then a good person to treat them or to help them. And this is where I see a couple of parallels as well to coaching, that if you have a good ability of empathy and you can somewhat understand how the person may feel in that situation, I think you can come very, very close and actually then understanding what they are experiencing in that given moment. Does it help? Absolutely. I think so, to go through that period yourself or through that process, but is it absolutely necessary? I don't think so. And I think that some people put too much weight and emphasis on that portion and neglect the things that are truly important. And those can't be neglected, such as having a good understanding of basically getting to that outcome or the end result. That can be accomplished in many, many different ways. But I think that empathy and also a good understanding of how to go there is actually definitely a requirement. Whereas going through the process yourself or having gone through the process yourself, it's not a necessity, but may just add in making things easier to understand.
I think go ahead, Steve.
I was just going to say, I always view it more as a bonus than a necessity, because it's similar to, I'm working with a competitor right now post competition. He's going through his recovery phase, and every person's different how they deal with that. And I'm very fortunate in that I find it a doddle, and touch wood, I still find it a doddle. It's never been an issue for me. It's just weird. I just continue to eat.
That's a British term, isn't it, Steve?
What's that? A doddle? Probably, yeah. I didn't even think about it. It must be a British term. So it's just simple for me. I'm like a robot. I just eat a bit more. Mm-hmm. And there's definitely things in the back of my head going on, and I'm a bit like, I have my own kind of trials and tribulations, but some people binge eat and things like this, and that's not something I've ever experienced. But unless they have a true binge eating disorder, I'm not referring that out, and I'm trying to work with them as best as possible to get through that. Now, do I think I needed to have binge eat, having gone through that struggles to be able to help them? No. Do I think it would maybe help, like a bit of a bonus? Probably. Like someone like Pascal, who I know has struggled with that, he may even be even more qualified or better to help that person, but not to the extent that I couldn't do a good job. Right. It's just, he might be slightly better at being able to understand how that person's feeling in that position. So yeah, I really, really agree with Pascal saying people emphasize it too much. Mm-hmm. I've spoken to some very high level coaches who have said that they've worked with some very rich, very smart individuals, and it's just like what sold them was like a flex of the bicep or the tricep, because they're just like, oh yeah, you have bigger arms than me. Yeah, I'm going to go with you. It doesn't matter what your qualifications are, right, what you've done in the past. You just look impressive. It astounds me, but I guess that's one of the stupid things humans do.
I definitely, I would agree with all that. I think it's like you said, people are going to be different, right? And so, okay, even if you've done 10 competitions, you could train somebody who has a completely different response than you do, right? Of course. I mean, their response on the way down could be different. Their response bulking back up could be different. And so your 10 competitions or your 20 competitions and you see that with bad coaches who have had success themselves, and they suck as coaches and they give really bad advice because maybe they're genetically gifted and maybe they think that the other person isn't working hard because of that. And why aren't you getting the results that I'm getting? I would much rather have somebody who has a body of work that shows their results with other people than just their own results, But again, that takes some introspection and looking at why do you actually care about how this person looks? And there's an extent, right? I mean, if there's a level where it's hard to know what somebody's background and genetics are, but if you look at somebody and they are actually obese, they're 300 pounds, I guess if they had 100 clients that have gotten shredded, maybe you'd listen to that. But there's a point where it's like, okay, if you're actually obese, are you following this lifestyle at all, right? There's a level that we expect. But as far as wow, is this a top tier physique, or they just have a decent physique? That to me, I think is kind of splitting hairs, and you need to look at their qualifications more. But obviously this doesn't just apply to fitness. I mean, it's funny, when I was applying to dental school, and I had people say, "Oh, well, you have a nice smile. That makes sense." Like as if my nice teeth have anything to do with my ability to work as a dentist, right? It's obviously
Yeah.
silly when I say that, but you'd be shocked. And at the same time, I think a lot of people, if they walked in and their young dentist was like had this like terrible mouth, they might be like, "Oh, like what's going on with that?" Right? Even though that
Yeah.
literally does not mean anything about my ability to perform the work, there is something that would go in your brain of like, what's going on there, you know? So I think to an extent, you have to walk the walk and you have to show that you're involved in the lifestyle. And I think that's where it comes. And we just have different levels of that. To some people, them seeing somebody who walks the walk means this guy is like blasting gear and looks amazing year round. And that's what I want. So that's what I need. So I almost can't hate on it to an extent. I understand, you know, if somebody has worked for 20 years and they have, you know, still like a very low income, are you going to take their financial advice even if they're credentialed? Are you going to take it? Like you might think, why you've been doing this for 20 years, why, you know, what happened? Unless there was some weird disaster, why haven't you accumulated wealth if you know what you're talking about? So while we can hate on it, and I definitely think people overemphasize it, I do understand why it's a thing.
Absolutely agree. Absolutely agree to everything that you said there and brought up. And I think that this is you basically the body and also what you present to the outside is basically also what you represent for the brand. This is, at least in our field, that's the case. I mean, if you're a mechanic or so, right, and you don't look like a mechanic, it doesn't really matter, right?
Yeah.
But especially in a field where appearance does matter, and this is, I mean, we are doing bodybuilding. People are looking at the physique, right? And you're being judged by the physique. So at least do a little bit of work to actually also represent that for the brand, and also maybe have done a show. And this is something, I mean, I always wanted to compete. So I'm not saying that I only do that for the business, but now after a couple of years of having done so and being in that realm of working with bodybuilders, yes, it's becoming more and more important to me, at least, to have done it, not just for my personal development and journey, but also especially for my CV, so to speak.
Yeah.
I remember speaking to you, Dave, when I said I had like a consultation call with Mike. I might have told Pascal this story, or I might not. I'm not sure, but it ended up he gave me some like business advice because we were talking about my physique progress and everything. He was like, the reason you're doing so well, Steve, is because you have like a very good physique, but almost like attainable to some individuals. And he was saying how if I was to go pro at some point, because that's my ambition. I'd love to turn pro. That's like the ambition of a natural bodybuilder who's competing. Like you want to do your best, and that's kind of the top tier is to go there. And he was like, I think that might even be a detriment to your business. Like if you were to go pro, because you just seem less approachable. And that, I mean, I think I've spoke it through to you, and I don't think that would ever stop me trying to do my best and try and go there, because I mean, that's how I'm wired. And I'd like to think that it wouldn't have a negative impact, but it's just interesting to think that it may even.
Yeah.
So to stay, and like you guys said, when you're a personal trainer, and especially personal trainers like one-on-one, your physique is your sales pitch.
Yeah.
And there's a reason like a lot of like personal trainers who do very well are in fantastic shape. And unfortunately it is the case where people look at that before maybe knowledge, but to be ignorant to it and not to realize it, you will not grow as a personal trainer if you don't get that in check.
And also, you can't blame the customer or the ones who are consuming your products or services. In the end, if you're complaining about that, then you are basically like blaming someone else for your failures or so. If you are offering a service or a product, then you need to fit the needs or the wants of the customer, right? Because demand will always be there. But if you're not offering what the people are looking for, then you won't succeed as a business. So you can't blame the customers that they don't buy your product, right? So let's say you are a kitchen chef and you are convinced that your meal is the best meal in the world, but no one else thinks that, right? Then you will go under because no one actually likes your product. It doesn't matter whether you think that's the right thing or you think that's the best meal on earth, right? You have to then actually meet the client maybe halfway, or maybe you walk that lonely road at first, and then after a while you attract some people as well, right? Because we see it all the time with those people who are personal trainers who just do what they love to do, and then after a while people are impressed by them, and then they attract the specific people they always wanted to attract, or they didn't even intend to be a personal trainer at first, but the demand was there and they saw an opportunity for themselves to benefit from that as well. So
yeah, it's a really interesting topic to me, just because it's not going to change. Like sometimes we talk about things like, oh, how can we change this, and we're changing the industry. I think it's awesome that we have this kind of evidence-based community, and I think it's certainly not futile. I think it's good. People are watching us, they're hearing this message, and then that will get spread to some degree. But I have no illusions that, one day everybody's going to just follow the evidence and they're not going to look at the physique. And, the guy with 18-inch arms isn't going to be getting more clients on average than the guy with 14-inch arms. I mean, it's always going to be there. I think, Pascal, like you mentioned, you can be upset about it, but ultimately you have to find out how you can be successful. I mean, if you look at, I always feel bad because I always bring up Brad Loomis as like the bad genetics, but I don't feel too bad because he and I have talked about it on air and everything, and he's mentioned it as well. But I think he's a great example because he has been a successful coach. He's gone pro as a natural bodybuilder, but also he's been a successful coach. And I don't know what his like measurements are or anything like that, but he's competes, I think, in like the 150s, and he's not like a huge guy, but he's done well. And I think if you can kind of show people what you've done. Now, where it's really going to be hard is if you haven't competed and you haven't coached people, because then it's like, what can you really show? Especially now with how competitive the market is. I mean, for me, I have a continuous small number of clients, and every once in a while somebody drops off, and then every once in a while people will message me and I'll take on another one or two in a month or something. But it's a low level, and I'm completely fine with that because it's a point where this is enjoyable for me. It doesn't stress me out. And I mean, not in the quarantine, but normally I have a full-time job, so I wouldn't even be able to do it unless I would have cut back hours in my office. But if somebody just said all of a sudden, like, hey, you got to make this work as a full-time career, that would be really tough. I mean, seriously, it's like, okay, I haven't competed, and I can show you before and after pictures and things like that, and they're good, but I'm competing with so many people online who frankly do have better physiques than me, and that does have to be really tough for up and coming people trying to get into the field.
Especially because it's like Steve said, there's so much, well, it's kind of so saturated the field already, and you're competing with the world's best.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, because it's not just limited to your location anymore, like it is when it comes to offline PT, but now you're competing with the very best there are, right? So why should anyone go to you instead of someone like Team 3DMJ, like RP or so, right? So this is first and foremost something that people have to understand. And then secondarily, this is something that we get asked very often on how to transition into online personal training. And more, I'm giving the advice of like, okay, do you really want that? Do you even know what that means and what it requires? Because yes, it looks sexy from the outside, but I think that many people would be better off in offering offline PT. And yes, while it may not be as attractive, you're not working from at home, your working hours aren't as flexible, maybe you're working more so with gem pop clients in comparison to maybe the physique athlete that you want to actually coach. However, you're first and foremost gaining a lot of experience. The competition is much lower. And also, you are gaining experience along with that. And you could even build up an online roster there with those clients that you work with offline and then transition them slowly into online personal training. And then all of a sudden, you can build your portfolio. And then you can start promoting yourself after a while with some before and after pictures. You can slowly build your business online as well. And then you basically have the experience, you gain the experience, you have online clients, and then you can slowly make the transitioning and give it a shot. Or maybe you come to the realization that, okay, offline is actually more so for you or better.
Yeah, I think, and I know Steve, you worked as an in-person trainer for a while, right? But not anymore.
Yeah, so I did. I don't even know how long it was in the end. Maybe in total, I think just less than a year, but maybe 6 months in or something, I was already transitioning to more online sides, so just reducing my hours.
Yeah.
And without that, I'm not sure where. I mean, I actually, I had like one client who I didn't know in person, and he was like my first client, but he reached out because he saw me on YouTube, and he was just like, "Oh, do you do online coaching?" And I was like, "Okay, I'll try and help you." But without that base of that kind of, they talk about it in business, and I by no means try and be a businessman and or give any business advice, particularly just talk about my own experience. But the know, like, and trust, it's so true. And when you're one-on-one with people, and like these are people I was training in the gym, they were next to me and I could talk to them, they could ask me questions, and then they were like, "Hey, can you help me a bit more?" And so then I took them online, and I just had, they then were my base. I just got some great results with some young guys who were really at it, and then they had good before and after photos, and then that led to a referral of, like, I worked with people I went to school with who I didn't really speak to at school, but they just saw that I was getting like fat loss results with some other people from school, and it just spread it was kind of local. And then it was only once I had that base, and then I continued social media, I continued like my YouTube and eventually the podcast, and I was doing blog writing. Then I spread to online. But I think too many people try to go from, I've got nothing, I'm going to be an online coach. And it's like, well, actually, there's got to be some way of getting here. And on the point of, just because it made me think about it, where like not everyone is going to be genetically blessed. You will have people like Brad Loomis or like us three who aren't like obscenely amazing. Like we're all right.
Sorry, Dave.
Yeah, right. No, definitely in that category.
Like we work
Steve,
hard.
I don't know if you're in that category anymore.
We work. Yeah, someone said, it was an Instagram post. Someone was like, "Oh yeah, you could see your amazing genetics before you even started lifting." I was like, "That was after 5 years of lifting." That was not from the get-go even. But regardless, people, this is why like Instagram has become so important, I think, at least like for me personally, and I think for Revive Stronger as a whole, because, and even the YouTube and the improvement season, because people still buy, and this is why you're getting clients, Dave, because like there are bigger companies out there who maybe are easier to find than you, but there would be people that just want Dave because you put yourself out there, they see your personality, they've seen what you've gone through, and they're like, "You're the guy for me." And there will be clients, and we've had like clients who have come from us from other coaches, or they go to us to other coaches because you don't fit for everyone. So I do think being able to put yourself out there and give your personality as well as your knowledge and the value and everything. But there just be some people who are just like, that guy, like you said, Eric Helms for you is just that's the guy for me. And there will be another guy for everyone or girl.
It's a super interesting, like I didn't even really plan for this to be the majority of what we talked about, but it's very interesting. And like, you're right. I've had people who said that they've worked with a couple other known people in the industry, and not like that they left them for anything wrong. They just felt like they really jived with me. And I mean, we would talk about it and they'd say, this person gave me X, but maybe, I liked your videos or whatever. And it is interesting to see that, because some of them certainly are a lot bigger than their YouTube channel's bigger, their following's bigger. But something clicked. Maybe it's my story or my background, whatever. But I do find that very interesting. Now, Pascal, your future plans to compete, you want to do, have you competed in powerlifting?
Yes.
Okay. That's what I thought. When is your plan to compete in bodybuilding?
The
Obviously,
plan
things are going to be,
the plan was in 2017, the first time. But I needed to pull the plug because I was still recovering from a hip surgery, and just my life was a mess during that time. Sleep was not good. Eating habits weren't good as well. Lots of things were going on in my personal life. So I needed to pull that plug. And I was basically not that far away from where I'm sitting at right now in regards to body weight. And I binged my face off because it was not sustainable for me during that time. Stress levels were so high, and all that kind of stuff led to me then, binging a lot. So 2018, I couldn't then, of course, step on stage or do anything I like. And then I tried to, or wanted to actually compete in 2019. However, my first biological son was born, and that was all, of course, a little bit of an interference there,
Yeah.
which is good that I actually made that decision of not competing in that year. Now looking back in hindsight, because I was first considering in doing so, and now looking back, I'm so happy that I didn't do it, because I could
Yeah.
fully commit and fully enjoy the entire process of him being born, and I would never change it for anything else. And now I wanted to compete here in 2020, and yeah, the thing happened, right?
Yeah.
The C19 happened. Not Dragon Ball Z reference, but more so the thing that may not be named here on YouTube. Yeah, it happened. It interfered with my initial plans, and I was on a good way. I think I was in a good spot. I'm still in a good spot, and now it's more about, okay, planning ahead, maybe doing it in 2021. I'm not entirely certain though, because I don't want to try it each and every single year, because I'm still
Yeah.
convinced that I have so much more room to grow, and at some point I need to start being committed to that and doing a very successful off season, because the gaining phases I've done so far, they weren't as well structured, as dedicated as they could have been. And this is something that I would truly want to do and take the time and really plan it out and commit to it, so that I can present the very best version of myself. And that's what I'm going to do. And probably I will take 2021 to actually make an off season. I haven't really fully committed to that yet, and then step on stage in 2022. It also depends a little bit on what Steve is planning, because we still have hopes on stepping on stage together at some point, or at least do some shows together, and that still needs to go down at some point. So yeah, it's kind of relying a little bit on what Steve is ending up doing, whether he competes next year or 2022. But I think he will compete next year.
Gotcha. Cool.
Right? Or what wasn't that? I don't know.
My plan, I have set up my plan to compete next year.
Yeah.
I think I'm pretty sure it will be next year. I could only think of something weird that happened maybe this year that meant, I don't know, maybe I completely didn't gain weight and then was just like, fuck it, I'm just going to do the finals and diet down for 10 weeks. I don't know. Yeah, next year is my target. That's what I'm thinking. I wanted to do this year. But obviously this year is a bit up in the air.
Yeah,
in the UK,
diet down and then not be able.
Yeah, all the qualifiers are cancelled. So just from a competitor standpoint, I want to do more shows to get more experience. It's not very nice to do just like one finals and then it's just like, and then imagine if you qualify for Worlds, but then travel isn't available, because I don't know when that's going to be available, if it will be this year or next at the moment. So yeah, I similarly did a bit of a pro and con list, and this year just didn't make sense. So hoping next year.
I feel so bad for the people who have really, gotten contest lean and gone through all of that. Especially imagine if it was like your first contest and you finally did it and you push yourself. Like, that has just got to be awful. And then
Steve had a client like this.
Yeah, I think I saw you. Was it the guy with the big legs? You were commenting on
that.
Yeah. Dude,
it was his first season. He planned it like 3 years in advance.
Yeah,
he had committed everything, and he brought elite conditioning for his first time.
I know you guys don't really follow any like the enhanced stuff, but there was, who was it? I forget who they were talking about. You guys might have heard the guy Thor, half Thor, doing the deadlift record, right? And somebody made a comment that I thought was really good, is that, people say, oh, you should wait until it's a real competition. But like, this guy is probably blasting so much gear to get this strong, to then put your body through that again. So for the people who are competing enhanced, it's almost worse in the sense that you're doing all this damage to your body for nothing, like literally nothing at this point. Like, that is to like take all that stress and everything of like, wow, I put on all this work, I'm starving and I'm damaging my body. It's very rough. I'm sure for everyone.
I'm wondering whether something like Olympia is going down or not.
The Mr. Olympia 2020.
Yeah.
I don't know. The thing is, it's got to be different somehow, because all the qualifiers are being canceled. So people aren't getting like the points and the different shows they need. So I'm sure they might, if they have it, there's got to be some sort of exceptions. Like, if you were there last year, you automatically qualify or something. I just can't imagine how that's going to be fair otherwise. Steve, you mentioned, I did remember what I was trying to think of before, how Mike had told you that it might be a detriment if you went pro. And I don't know obviously the whole context of the conversation, but in your case, I can't imagine because you have your whole journey documented, you've been doing this for a while and it's been out there. So people could kind of see that process, and it's
True.
how it's been this slow journey up. So they'll see, oh, somebody with maybe average, maybe slightly above average, but really who knows genetics and how they've gotten there and they've gone pro. I think the fact that you suddenly got this card isn't going to make you. I can't imagine it would actually hurt your business. But it is interesting. Yeah, if you were to come into it and you really had amazing genetics, that might be less relatable. And then, Pascal, I actually liked what you said about maybe personal training in person is a better idea for you. And for a lot of people, it probably will be. It might be what they just do indefinitely. Not everybody's going to be able to switch to online coaching. I think there's nothing wrong with having it be just something that you primarily do in person and having a couple of clients online. I mean, that's how many people who do online coaching have other full-time jobs in or out of the field. I mean, that's me. That's plenty of people. And if you don't have that, where, like you said, Steve, where does your base come from, right? I have a base of people that I've helped, but I've been doing this since I was 12 years old. So yeah, I have Facebook conversations from 2009 where I'm helping friends out and I'm still giving them advice, and I have their before and after pictures. And over the years, I helped people in college, and I had some people in dental school, and I worked at a gym in dental school. And so even though I might be a relatively new online coach, I've been helping people online for a while. I mean, when I first posted some before and after pictures, one of the first new clients I got was somebody I went to high school with, and I'd known him and I had given even friends of his advice, but it wasn't until it was on an online platform that it really started to build up more. But yeah, you got to get your base somewhere. So I think a lot of people see it and they're just quick to jump into it. It's man, you're probably gonna have to work and do stuff. I mean, Jeff Alberts was a full-time career in another field until he met the other 3DMJ guys. So not to break anybody's dreams, but it's not oh, snap my finger, I'm an online coach.
And I think that this is somewhere where the problem stems from, that people want those quick success stories and they aren't willing to put in the work and effort. And also the question could be made in regards to, okay, what is it that you actually want? Do you want to help people? Why can't you do it offline? Right? So I know I've worked offline, Steve has worked offline, and I can't see myself going back into that setting anymore because I love what I'm doing, right? I know it's different to offline PT, but at the same time, the core principle is helping people getting to their desired outcome. So why can't you do it offline then? Is it something that you don't like in doing? Is it something that you have a different perception on? Right. So I don't know if you ever read the book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, where he talks about he always wanted to be a professional musician, but he rather liked the thought of being that professional musician instead of the journey that actually takes him there. All the hard work, all the sleeping on the floor, all the gigs in front of one or two people, all the hours in the studio. He didn't like that thought of actually putting in that much work and effort. But those people who are very passionate about that, they love and embrace that journey. And the end goal is just a nice byproduct of all the hard work and dedication they've put into it all. And that's basically how I see personal training as well. That if you just like the idea of you being an online personal trainer and having success there, probably that is not the field for you. If you just like the compelling idea of you standing at the top, because what you should enjoy is the journey towards that top.
Yeah. Do you guys know? Do you guys watch the Marvel movies, like the Avengers and all that stuff?
Yeah.
So I'm a huge fan, and Chris Evans, who plays Captain America, well, I don't want to spoil anything, but I was joking how oh, I could be the next Captain America. I've got the beard like him. We have the same birthday. I'm exactly 10 years younger than him, and his dad is a dentist. So I'm there's a lot of connecting things here. So if you're watching, Chris Evans, sign me up. But does the idea of if they were hey, Dave McConey, for whatever reason, we want you to be in this Marvel movie, of course I'd be yeah, put me in there. But if they're actually, you're going to start and do some basic acting classes, and then you're going to do some really crappy films, then you're going to do some really crappy plays that are kind of embarrassing, and then you're going to go through 20 years of stuff and just be struggling along. to maybe, 1 in 10, but not even 1 in 10, 1 in like 100 or 1,000 chance of actually like making it big. Does that idea sound cool to you? Do you still want to be an actor now? It's like, no, I definitely don't want to do that. The journey does not sound appealing at all. It's like it's like you said, it's standing at the end, it's having all that glory and everything. And that applies, I think, to a lot of people with actors, with athletes, with celebrities and influencers and all that stuff. And, I like you guys doing the improvement season because, like you said, Pascal, it's kind of like you guys just talking. And the podcast that I've had with you, Steve, and Jacob and Abel, and now Pascal, it's kind of, this is more conversational. These aren't these like huge, like, this is the question, here's our exact answer. We're kind of just talking, and I've been able to enjoy the journey of this. If I ever have 100,000 people listening to my podcast, that would be great. But like, I met up with Greg Knuckles, Eric Trexler, Mike Israetel. Like, I've gotten to meet people and make these connections, and that's been enjoyable for me. And if I get, any sort of, I don't know, Instagram stardom, that's cool, I guess. But, it's kind of whatever. So I think it's a great point, Pascal.
Yeah,
that's basically how Steve started the podcast as well.
Yeah, actually it was. I started it because I wanted to talk to, at the time, this is going way back, I don't know if you even know Mark Newcomb. We did some podcasts together because he was the first coach who I brought on the team initially. And he's a great guy. Unfortunately, it didn't work out for his life circumstances, just didn't work with that. And then it was like, we were just having the discussions like me and Pascal have, answering questions, talking to each other, because I wanted to get him more exposure. And then I started interviewing. I just brought on Mike because there was some questions left over from a seminar. And so then I just was like, do you mind doing a Q&A? And after it, Mike was like, do you want to do this more often? And it was funny because I'd already asked, I don't know, like Charlotte or something. I was like, I really want to do more of those with Mike. It was really good. So we both were like, yeah, let's do this. And then we were doing that. It grew my confidence to then want to bring other people on. And I just enjoyed having the conversations and sharing knowledge. And now the podcast is like huge for us. It's like content production across the board for me and Pascal is like almost half our job is like making sure we're putting out high quality content, because that's essentially what builds the business, builds up kind of clients. And I think a lot of online coaches won't realize that. They're just like, oh yeah, I can take on like 60 clients. It's like, how are you going to get those 60? And then how are you going to retain them through other like, there's just so much that goes into building from the ground up, like Pascal said. And like you said, for like various careers, it's just, people don't realize.
I don't know if you remember the first time we ever talked, Steve, but I reached out to you on Facebook, which it's crazy to me that was now 1.5 years ago. But I had known Scott Stevenson for a while, and you had then had him on the podcast. And I am like a fanboy of Scott Stevenson and Eric Helms. And I said, would you consider like having them on together? And you're like, oh, I'm thinking about doing something like that. And then like a month or two went by, and I was like, you know what? I'm just going to do it. So, because I
never did it.
Yeah. And I had known them. I knew Eric, and I didn't know Eric, but like I talked to Eric and I did know Scott. And I just thought like, I think I'm going to do this. And I was like super pumped about it. And obviously, there's that initial, like, this is the best idea ever. And then I was like, oh wait, there's actually a lot of work involved. But that's kind of how it started. It was like, I want to talk to these people anyway. So why not record it and put it out there and just make it helpful for other people?
Yeah. I've said it to, and I think we both flag it up to each other. If there was things within what we're doing day to day we didn't enjoy, we'd tell one another. And so we kind of have our kind of roles within the business, and we both enjoy what we're doing. But there's things like I ran the mini cup movement, like group coaching years ago, and I just didn't enjoy it. So I didn't want to invest into it. And I've said to Pascal, and like, hopefully, well, yeah, it doesn't really matter. Like, you probably had it as well. You do some podcasts, and sometimes it wasn't bad. You just didn't enjoy it that much. And I had like, I don't know, there was a period of time where I was just like in a bit of a rut with it. And then I'm like, okay, actually, like, I bring on this person, I have really good rapport with them. They make the best podcasts as well. You probably agree, like when you can actually talk to someone and really enjoy it. And it's making sure you stick to enjoying those things. Because even if something was going to make us like really rich, we wouldn't do it if we didn't enjoy it, because it probably wouldn't make us really rich because we wouldn't put our best into it.
Right. Awesome stuff, guys. So obviously, I think anybody listening at this point knows where they can find you, but why don't you tell them anyway?
Go ahead, Steve.
We are revivestronger.com is our website, so they can find the podcast. We have various articles on there, and also our members area, which is kind of new and growing, which is exciting, where we're bringing on various experts to talk about topics, and we have a forum and things. So that's really cool, that growing community. And then Pascal is Pascal_Flor. I should probably let Pascal do
That's
that
right.
on Instagram.
That's right.
And I'm Revive Stronger on Instagram. I could never change mine now, could I? Because there's too many links out there, and I'd be lost.
Yeah.
I was thinking that the other day. Can't be at Steve Hall. Who's that?
Right. All right. Any closing words, Pascal, or did Steve cover it?
No, I just want to say thank you very much for having us on. And it's been a pleasure. And it's been a while. So even more so an honor to be once again re-invited to the podcast. And yeah, that's basically my last words here.
Great stuff, guys.
Thank you, Dave.